What if the one memory you've held on to your whole life turned out to be a lie? Or at least, not the whole story. That's exactly what we're diving into today. It's this incredibly powerful memoir that kicks off with that exact question and unravels a family secret that's been buried for 50 years. We're talking about loss, memory, and a really hidden truth.
So this line, it's from a poem someone in the family actually wrote, and it just sets the scene perfectly, doesn't it? 10 dirt poor Southerners. You can immediately picture it, a big, hardworking family out in the tobacco fields of North Carolina. But here's the thing. This poem, it's more than just a description. It's almost like a prophecy, a really somber countdown of all the loss this family was about to face.
Okay, and this is the memory that's at the absolute center of everything. Just try to wrap your head around this for a second. From a 4-year-old's point of view, climbing into a coffin with her daddy. I mean, it's just so strange, it's almost unbelievable, right? And this is a memory that just wouldn't make sense for 50 long years. This is the starting point for the whole search for answers.
Let's ground ourselves in a specific time and place. North Carolina, March 24th, 1954. Just one single day, but it's a day that would completely change the course of this family's life forever. This is the day that a seed of mystery was planted, and man, it would take decades to finally unravel.
So that really bizarre memory of the coffin, turns out it wasn't some isolated thing. It was directly tied to another huge trauma that happened on the exact same day. The family barn, the one filled with their entire tobacco crop, their livelihood, it burned to the ground. So you've got a funeral and a fire all at once. It's just this confusing, chaotic blur of events that would, understandably, haunt the author for the rest of her life.
Okay, but before we get into unraveling that tragedy, I think it's really important to get a feel for the world that was lost, The author does such a great job of painting this vivid picture of her early childhood. And yeah, they were poor, no question about it, but their life was so rich in all these other ways.
I mean, look at this. You can almost feel the dirt roads under your feet, right? Smell the tobacco and the watermelons, taste those grainy and slimy grits for breakfast. Life was all about these really simple sensory things. 4 or 5 kids packed into one bed, chasing lightning bugs and putting them on strings, singing to doodlebugs in the sand. It was a world you experienced with all your senses. And the thing is, they didn't even know they were poor. They were just kids, They didn't have toys, so they just made up their own games and figured that's what all kids did. There's this beautiful innocence there. And that's what makes what comes next so much more devastating. This world of just normal, simple, childhood joy is about to be shattered. So, in the middle of all this childhood wonder, there was this big empty space, a void. And that brings us back to the central figure of this whole story, the man she only remembers as Daddy. He was like a ghost in their family's history, a person who was defined more by his absence than his presence.
And this is the question that just haunted her entire life. I mean, think about it. Out of all the memories a little kid could have of her dad playing with him holding her, just hearing his voice, the only thing she had left was this image of him in a coffin. That one single, haunting memory is what would push her to find the truth, no matter how long it took.
So this is the story the kids were told, or at least the one they cobbled together over the years. That he was a hardworking farmer, got overwhelmed with stress from supporting 8 kids, and had a mental breakdown. He was sent to a hospital for treatment, but when he came home, he was a different person. He couldn't even remember his own family. And then suddenly, he died of heart failure. It's a story with a lot of holes, The pieces just never really added up. Okay, so fast forward decades. The author's sister is in nursing school, and she finally gets her hands on their dad's medical records. And what she found in there, well, it wasn't a story about treatment and healing. It was a story of these brutal, frankly experimental procedures that were shockingly common back then. The first thing they found was something called ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. We call it shock therapy, but in the 1950s, this was a whole different animal. It was a seriously violent procedure. I want you to just try and imagine electrical currents being passed through your brain to force a massive seizure, all while you're wide awake. And if that wasn't enough, there was a second treatment, insulin coma therapy. This is where doctors would inject patients with these huge doses of insulin, enough to deliberately send them into a coma. And they do this over and over again, day after day. It was incredibly dangerous, super high risk, and yeah, it was actually discontinued in the US just a few years later. So let's be really clear. This was not therapy like we think of it today. Not even close. There was no consent form, no anesthetic to knock you out, no pain medication, nothing to even stop the violent convulsions from breaking your bones. And here's the absolute kicker. Severe, permanent memory loss? That wasn't some rare, unfortunate side effect. It was a known and expected outcome of the procedure.
And this is where it all comes together. Look at the massive gap between what the family believed and what actually happened. They thought he was getting help. The reality? He was being subjected to experiments. They thought his memory loss was part of his breakdown. Nope, it was a direct result of the therapy. And the worst part? They were told he died of heart failure. The truth is, his heart attack was caused by a fatal overdose of insulin, given to him by the doctors.
You'd think finding out the truth would bring some kind of relief, some closure, but it didn't, not at all. It didn't get rid of 50 years of grief. Instead, it just reframed it. It forced the author and her family to face the real, absolutely horrifying cause of the trauma that had shaped their entire lives.
Yeah, the truth didn't make the pain go away. If anything, it made it feel brand new. That vague, confusing mystery they'd lived with was suddenly replaced by a sharp, very specific horror. They finally knew why it had all happened, and the answer was just almost unbearable.
And that one event, that original trauma, it just echoed down through the decades. This timeline, it shows you how that family poem we started with became a devastating reality. After their daddy died, it was just this cascade of loss. The mama, then one of the twins, the sisters, the brother, one after another. It was like that first tragedy set this heartbreaking domino effect in motion for the whole family.
So after an entire lifetime filled with questions and vague answers, this is the conclusion the author finally lands on. And it's so stark. It's not just that her daddy died, it's how he died. He wasn't just a patient getting treatment. He was a person, a human being who had a nervous breakdown and was then killed by medical experimentation.
And that brings us full circle, right back to that poem that started this whole story, specifically to its final chilling lines. It's this question that just hangs over the siblings who are still alive, this fear that the death rattle that began all the way back in 1954 might not be done with their family just yet. And so we end here, with the author's own uncertainty. After all of this, after digging up this terrible truth and finally telling the story, she's still left wondering. I have hopes that writing this will help ease the pain and bring some peace. I wonder if it will. Can telling the story actually heal a wound that you've carried for your entire life? It's a really powerful question to leave us with, about the messy relationship between truth, memory, and finding some kind of peace.